I've been fascinated with the departure of Harbaugh from the Ravens, going over to the Giants, and I've been watching like 17,000 hours of sports talk. And by the way, let's all pray for Stephen A. Smith, because apparently that is an angry young man, as much as he yells and shouts. But I love the stories. I love the stories of what's been talked about with not the sportscasters, but what these prognosticators, what these people that have these YouTube channels. And it fascinates me that you've got a YouTube channel of a guy and he's just talking about the game that you can't watch, but he's telling you about it, and he's got 1 million followers on YouTube. And that's just fascinating to me. But I love the stories that they tell, and they're talking about with this coach or that coach and this coach or that coach. And it got me into the story mood. And so I want you to imagine, if you will, we're going to have story time. Imagine, if you will, a master craftsman. Besides Tim, is anybody really good with their hands and tools? Is anybody like a closet Joe Gibbs making a boat in their basement right now? Just Tim? Okay. But imagine you're spending the entire winter, and you're building this most magnificent birdhouse the world has ever seen. I mean, you're using the finest cedar that you can buy. You're using hand tools instead of power tools. You're hand sanding this thing until it's just smooth as silk, and you're painting it this brilliant colors, and it's wholly white. You shingle the roof with these tiny, perfect tiles. You place it on a pole in the center of a lush, snow-covered, now I imagine this is in the spring, lush green lawn. And you fill the tray with expensive, organic, gluten-free sunflower seeds. You want to make sure the birds are healthy. And then you go inside. You sit by your window, and you're waiting for the bird songs and the fluttering of wings and the chirpy chirps, but the birds never come. Now, right across the street from you, there is an uninhabitable, it's an empty house. And it's got this humongous lilac bush that has been overgrown and out of control for the last 20 years. That's where all the birds are. And this messy, overgrown thicket of brambles and weeds and lilacs and dirty, tangled, and it's all just wild looking. But that's where the birds are. They're busy dodging the bigger birds, the ravens and the hawks that come by every once in a while. They're huddling against the freezing rains, and they're scratching in the dirt for worms, and they're not looking for a perfect white house on a manicured lawn. They're just trying to survive the shadows. Well, now imagine, for nearly 50 years, Miss Martha, we'll call her. Miss Martha was a lady who lived in that perfect birdhouse. To her, the church was the center of her universe. She loved the smell of the lemon-oiled pews and the way that the piano made the floorboards of the sanctuary hum. And Martha believed with all of her heart that the great light was kept safely inside those walls. Martha's life was proper, and her faith was stiff. A religion of the soul's shackles, defined by correct information rather than actual transformation. She had the light. But she had it under a very expensive, beautiful bushel basket. There was a gap in her life, in her perfect picture of a life. Her grandson Leo, would not visit the birdhouse. Her neighbor Sarah, a nurse working 70 hours a week, thinking about getting a second job if she could sneak it in somewhere, didn't have the energy to dress up for the church. The world was in a deep darkness as Martha was sitting in a palace of light, wondering why the room was so empty. It's the status and the stasis of the modern church. We have the light, but we've forgotten that light was meant to travel. Now, the interruption in this perfect picture happened on a Tuesday morning. Martha was doing what she does every Tuesday morning. She was reading her Bible. And she turned to the Gospel of Matthew. For the first time, the words didn't just stay on the page. They started to smell. It's like damp nets, rotting seaweed, honest sweat. She saw Jesus, not in the temple, but walking along the Sea of Galilee, the Galilee of the Gentiles. This was a wild place, a borderland. This is where people of different cultures and languages, they just collided. It was a place of commerce, tax collectors, calloused hands, honest, good, hardworking men and women. Jesus sees two brothers, Peter and Andrew. They're not praying. They're busy working. They're throwing heavy, wet nets into the water, right in the place that isn't home, isn't a synagogue, but it's the place where life happens. Jesus didn't go up to them and say, "Would you like to hear a lecture on theology? Please come to the synagogue on Saturday. We have coffee." No. Jesus steps into the mud. He looks at their nets and he says, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Now Martha, she gasped as she realized that Jesus had moved the pulpit to the shoreline. He didn't wait for the birds to find the birdhouse. He went into the thicket where they were hiding. To truly understand this, we got to see that Jesus was performing this radical act of relocation. By calling them at their nets, he validated their labor as the primary site of holy transformation. In this Galilee, the fishers were at the bottom of the economic chain. Yet Jesus didn't ask them to change their skills, only their target. He moved them from harvesting for an empire to gathering for a kingdom. And Martha realized that this fresh expression, it wasn't just some program for that week. It was an original, messy heartbeat of the gospel. And as Martha felt this fire, she encountered those monsters of the Western mind. We often operate under a logic of fear that prioritizes preserving our buildings, preserving our comfort over missional risk. Martha felt the monsters of reputation, inadequacy, the messy world outside. In the letters to the Corinthians, we're told the message of the cross is foolishness. Foolishness to those who think they have the world figured out. In our Western context, wisdom is defined by efficiency and safety. To leave the birdhouse and sit in a messy coffee shop, tattoo parlor, bar, and sit in a messy environment just feels inefficient. Martha's comfort was her armor. It kept her safe, but it also kept her from the light. She thought about today's scary world of tragic news and polarized hearts. And fear seemed like the logical response. But the Psalms gave her a new logic. Maybe y'all, remember hearing this before. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Martha realized that seeking God's face wasn't about a stained glass window. It was about looking for God's fingerprints in the messy and the broken and the unscrubbed world. And the rubber met the road on a rainy Thursday at a coffee shop. Martha had started going there about once a week to practice becoming a church, becoming the church. The realization that she was the tent of the Lord moving through the neighborhood. She embraced the theological truth that the sacred is not confined to the sanctuary. The ordinary table becomes a site of grace. And she saw her neighbor Sarah in a corner booth, looking gray, staring into her coffee. Sarah was the bird in the thicket, exhausted by a healthcare system that demanded everything and gave nothing back. Usually, Martha would have just made a mental note to put her on the prayer chain, pray for her later when she got home. But the conviction that the world is my parish demanded more. Martha's heart thumped against her ribs as she walked over, and many of us stay in the Birdhouse because we lack a script. We don't know what we're going to say. We don't know what's going to happen. But Martha leaned into the ministry of presence. She didn't start with a sermon. Do y'all remember it was a pool by Bethesda, and it's a pool where an angel comes down and stirs the water in the morning. The first person to the water gets healed, and there's this man that's been lame for 30-some years or longer, and then Jesus walks up to him and he says, "Do you want to be healed?" He didn't give him a sermon. He didn't debate some theology. And Martha started with a brave question. Can I just sit with you? That's all. Can I just sit? And she accepted that. Her first attempt might feel clumsy, might feel foolish. And she goes, "Sarah, you look like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. Can I just sit with you?" Sarah looked up, and Martha saw the face of God in the tired eyes of a nurse. Sarah talked about lost patience, being attacked by patience, the exhaustion of her soul. Right there in that third space, in that muddy part of life, Martha took Sarah's hands and they prayed. The coffee shop became a sanctuary. The liturgy of the daily grind where every interaction is a potential altar. And as Martha walked home that day, the light began to reveal things she hadn't wanted to see. She felt a prophetic spirit whispering that her ministry couldn't stop at a latte. Kindness is the beginning, but not the end of the gospel. She looked at Sarah's street. Street lights were broken. The houses were falling apart. Garbage had piled up and down the streets. Homeless people were pitching tents along the side roads. Houses were falling apart. Sarah wasn't just tired. She was being crushed by a yoke of economic injustice. And remembering Isaiah, Martha knew that the Lord breaks the yoke of their burden and the bar across their shoulders. if she truly loved Sarah. She couldn't just comfort her in the shadow. She had to ask why the shadow was even there. You see, charity is a poor substitute for justice. That Martha realized that healthy discipleship meant moving from kindness to solidarity. She looked for God's face in the struggle, not just the suffering. She started asking city council questions about why Sarah's neighborhood was so neglected. See, the light doesn't just warm hearts. It burns away the structures that keep people in the dark. This is social holiness. The idea that there is no holiness but social holiness. And Martha's latte liturgy, it transformed. Soon she was joined by the barista, by the waitresses, and Mrs. Higgins. They met not just to pray, but to act, becoming a community that was rooted in the wild of real life, both spiritually deep and socially active. They became a lighthouse, pressuring the city to fix lights and starting a community garden. And they practiced the power of Christ with a drum major instinct for justice. And this requires a rigorous neighborhood audit for us today. It requires us to get out in our neighborhoods and walk around to identify where is the Galilee in our communities. The dog park, the break room, a coffee shop, Oscars, the laundromat, Queen City Inc. Then what specific burden is crushing your neighbors? Is it loneliness? Is it food insecurity? A lack of affordable housing? Maybe something else. Then you got to ask yourself, what proper reputation are you willing to drop to meet somebody in the mud? Now, Martha still loves her third pew on the left, but she knows it's just a launching pad. That's not where it ends. Sunday is where she goes to be reminded that she is loved so that on Monday she can go out and love the world enough to change it. Look at your own hands. Are they proper and stiff? Or ready to mend nets and break yokes? The great light is here. But it's also waiting in the wild places where the birds are huddling and justice makes the night seem never ending. Now, carrying the light doesn't get rid of fear, but it shows us how to not let fear control us. There is a fierce urgency of now. We can't wait for the birds to find our birdhouse. We got to go to the shoreline. Don't be afraid of the foolishness of the cross or the monsters under the bed. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart. We are the people of the light. The fresh expression of a God who refuses to stay inside a building. The birdhouse is beautiful, but the master craftsman is calling us to the shoreline to build a beloved community where every single yoke is broken and every single face is seen. The nets are waiting. The light is shining. The wild is calling. Will you go?